Good evening, and what's different about this Sunday night is that after this evening, we've reached the halfway point of the course. And I hope that you found it interesting so far and beneficial, worthwhile, and informative. All that being said, I hope you've really found it interesting. And by way of my usual looking back at the week before and looking ahead at the week to come, I think last week was pretty interesting, and apparently a lot of you did too. I had everything ranging from a statement saying that we thought that the discussion last week was a loaded question, to a couple of inquiries by a couple people saying, gee, am I on the right track? I haven't really thought about things this way before. And all that tells me it was probably a good question and a lot of good critical thought going on. And I just want to kind of back up a little bit and review the whole idea with the Baldrige criteria. You don't, in there we talk about customer-centered excellence, but we also talk about valuing the employees. And I think this week we kind of hit both. We're still listening to the voice of the customer, and now we're trying to find out, is there more than one customer? Usually when in business we talk about customers, we talk about the people who are out there buying our goods and services. Well, the whole idea of the internal customer comes up, and we start realizing that maybe everyone we have a relationship is a customer of what we do, even though we ourselves may not produce the end product. We may be producing a component, we may be providing a piece of a process. All that comes into play. And a lot of the literature you'll find in Baldrige talks about, pretty much, if almost oversimplified, if you don't take care of your workforce, how can they take care of the customer? You take care of the workforce, that takes care of the product takes care of the customer takes care of the profits. This is very interesting that some people said they hadn't even approached it this way before. I really would like people to keep thinking about that as they go through the rest of the course. The other interesting part was the whole idea of stakeholder versus stockholder. You know, stockholder is definitely a legal financial term. A stockholder is an owner. Therefore, by definition, a stockholder is also a stakeholder. But stakeholders come in many shapes and sizes. A stakeholder could be anybody that has anything to do with your business, really. That your business or your operation or your organization or your actions has a material effect on what they do in their lives and in their organizations and in their businesses. They're stakeholders. And I think I would like to illustrate that by telling you a little story almost from one of my old consulting clients. And when I worked with this company, they had about 75 people in the company, small, literally in the insurance business, a third-party benefits provider. And I was sitting with the executive vice president one day. He was the chief operating officer of the business. And he looked up, and we were actually doing some strategic planning. And he voiced the fact that he felt he was responsible for about 300 people. And of course, my initial reaction was, say a little bit more about that, George. You've only got 75 employees. And immediately the first thing he said was, yeah, but they've got families. And whatever I do for my employees affects them. Well, there you go. There's a perfect example of an executive who saw that not only did the employees who worked for his company have a stake in its success, but so did their families, and by extension, other people in the community have a stake in the success of his company. So he thought about it clearly in the right way, and that's what we talk about when we're talking about stakeholders with Baldrige. Now, this week, we're going to start talking about something even more, I think, I won't say even more interesting, because I don't see how anything could be more interesting than the idea of internal customer and the stakeholder thing, but maybe even more new to some people, or be able to look at this one as one of the I never thought of it that way before moments. And I'd like us this week to start looking at the idea of metrics and measurements. You know, there's a saying that if it's not measured, it doesn't get done. And, you know, that really can happen. Look at the students. If I don't tell them an assignment is due, when is it going to come in? You know, If we don't tell you what time to show up, well, then when do your employees come to work? Whenever they feel like it. All those kind of things. Maybe those are silly little examples, but it's really true. Things that get measured tend to get done. Things that don't get measured tend not to get done. But when we start looking at quality, now we have to start looking at the idea, are we measuring the right things? Are we measuring things that are important to success? Are we measuring things that will help us achieve our strategic goals? In fact, one of the things I've often said to people is, are we measuring what our customers measure? You know, if you have a customer group that all they care about is low price and you're not measuring your costs, then you're probably doing that customer group a disservice and probably doing yourself a disservice at the same time. Yet at the same in the same way of thinking, if you have a customer group that values quality more than price and you're worried about just cutting costs, well, you're doing that next customer group a disservice and yourself a disservice as well, because you're not able to provide for their needs. So look at it this way. Measurements and metrics are critical. They help us, but can they sometimes deceive us? Can they sometimes not tell us everything we need them to tell us? And what does this mean for the way we run our businesses and the way we run our organizations? So read carefully. I think we've got some interesting takes on the whole idea of measurement, what it means to you, what it means to the process of quality. Thank you again. As usual, this has been a really great experience for a lot of us with the discussion board. You guys do an excellent job, and I think we'll just continue along most of the practice of I'm going to be continuing to give you feedback directly. Remember, it gets a little harder each week. So maybe the criteria I'm using or my application of those criteria is getting a little stiffer, because I think everybody's getting more and more experience. Some people have really stepped up, and I can just see in 2 or 3 weeks the difference between what they were doing a couple of weeks ago and what you're doing now, and that's very gratifying to see. So thank you again. Remember, what we're looking at this week is metrics and measurement, but don't forget the ideas of internal and external customer, stockholder, and stakeholder. It's going to be very important as we go forward. Okay, thank you and good night.